Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kenneth, and today we are focusing on two critical functions and one major feature for managing your data. The two critical functions are importing spaces and restoring spaces. The major feature is the key repository. So, this webinar today is brought to you by TeamDrive, Sync Smarter, Share Safer. Again, today we are focusing on managing access to your space, namely the key repository, and importing and restoring spaces. So whether you are setting up TeamDrive on a new computer, or recovering from a password change, or dealing with local issues with the space, knowing how to properly bring your data back online is essential. So in the next 30 minutes, we will cover what is the key repository, how does it work, and why is it important, how to import a space from the server or a backup file, how to handle space keys after a password change, and the difference between a simple restore and a restore from scratch. So let's jump right in. Okay, so the key repository is a feature that can grant you immediate access to spaces not available in your current TeamDrive installation. So for further explanation, when a space is created or you join a space via TeamDrive invitation, a backup key for that space is automatically generated and saved on your local hard drive. So let's create a space. So we have the space that we just created, key repo space. Now if we navigate to the backups folder, we will see that a key has been created. We see we have the date and time of when we just created the key. So now keep in mind this backup key here contains access to all four of the spaces, or all, in this case, all four of the spaces, but all spaces currently active in your TeamDrive client when the key was created. So this single backup key will allow you to import all four of these spaces. So in other words, you will not have a single backup key per space saved on your local hard drive. So what the key repository does is it stores encrypted copies of your space keys on our server. Important here is that the copies of your space keys are partially encrypted with your user password. With that said, if you change your user password, you lose access to all encrypted copies of the space keys associated with that password. The key repository is an optional feature, and by default, it's turned on. So let's go to see where we can view the settings for the key repository. So if we go into the TeamDrive settings and we go to backup, at the very top, we see the option backup keys on the server. This is the key repository feature. And you see it's already turned on. And again, with every installation, it's normally automatically turned on you unless you elect to turn it off. But as a safety feature, it's automatically turned on. So when the key repository is in use, it serves as a backup for your space keys, and it also ensures that you have access to your spaces when you log into TeamDrive on a different device. The key repository can be accessed as long as you remember your password or have a valid login on one of your TeamDrive devices. So we can demonstrate that. So we see we have 4 spaces here, and when I created this space, a key for this space was also um, uploaded to the key repository. So what I will do here is I will quit TeamDrive and I will manually create a new instance. In other words, create a new installation of TeamDrive. Okay, so when we now start TeamDrive, we now have the ability to log in once again. So this for us is a new installation. Oh, okay, so now we're logged in and we see we have no active spaces. Because this is a new installation, there are no active spaces. So now if I go to the menu and I go to inactive spaces, I see that I have 4 inactive spaces. And these are the spaces that have automatically been imported from the key repository. And these are the exact same spaces that we just saw before I created this new instance. So what we can do here is we can activate the spaces. So before I activate them, I'll also go to back to my spaces folder because for test purposes I've already had active spaces. So a pro tip here is if you're in a situation like this where you have newly installed TeamDrive, but you still have your old space folders in the same location, a pro tip here would be to rename the existing folders. And the reason for that is I'm just simply adding an underscore to rename them. And the reason for that is you're not allowed to have 2 folders with the same name in one location. And to remedy an issue like this, what TeamDrive will do, if it realizes you have a folder in the spaces location that already has the same name of the space you're trying to join, it will automatically add a number to the new space. So for example, it would look like this. And that's not what we want. So what I do beforehand is I will rename the spaces. So let's say I just join only one space. I click on it, I activate it, and we see a new folder, a new space folder is created because I've been able to join the space. And now when I go back to active spaces, I have one active space. So this is what happens when you use the key repository and you log in on a new device. So you can also disable the key repository. And when you disable the key repository, in that moment, all of the keys stored on the server will be deleted. So you have to confirm this. There's an information window that pops up to inform you that all keys will be immediately deleted. So we'll just click OK. I still have my active spaces. And so again, we can simulate creating a new installation to see what happens now when I log in after I've already uh, removed my keys. So we'll just simulate that. So now if I go to the menu and I go to inactive spaces, I have no inactive spaces because no keys were automatically imported using the key repository. Now again, if I were to re-enable the key repository, once I re-enable the key repository, all the spaces currently in my client at that time, keys for those spaces will be uploaded and stored on the server. But right now I have no spaces, which is actually a perfect scenario for the next point, for the next part of the demonstration that we would like to go to. So part two, importing a space. So you typically need to import a space when you log into TeamDrive on a new device and you want to access spaces you're already a member of. For flexibility reasons, users have the choice to activate specific spaces on specific devices. And importing a space allows us to do that. So to import a space, we want to navigate to the import menu. So we go to the TeamDrive settings. We open the TeamDrive settings, and then we go to backup. We can also turn the key repository back on. And from backup, we go to import keys. And in a normal situation, we recommend using the import from server option first. But since I've already uh, removed the keys from the key repository, there will be no keys to import, not in this instance. We will do that afterwards. So first what we will do is use the import from backup file option. And then we have the option to import from those backup files that we saw. So this was the backup file that we created when um, when we when we created the space, and this backup file was automatically created once I disabled the key repository. So we'll import both. And the import happens very quickly. And we see once we've imported the spaces, we have 4 inactive spaces. So when importing, if you have 10 spaces or more, then I recommend that you um, import max 5 at a time. Otherwise, you can use the select all feature by clicking here on the 3 dots and then going to select. Again, if you're importing 10 or more spaces, then I recommend that's my personal recommendation to import 5 at a time. But in this case, I can do select all, especially since I know all of these spaces are very small. But before I do that, I will also go and check my spaces location again to make sure I don't already have any spaces with the same name. And I do. So to make sure we don't run into any issues there. So I've activated the space now. Now, if we go back to our backups folder, we'll see another key has been created. And this key, again, contains access to all 4 of the spaces that I just activated. And this key is also now on the server as well. So since the key is on the server, what I'll do is I'll create a new TeamDrive instance. Well, actually, I'll let these spaces join first. Shouldn't take much longer since the spaces aren't that large. Oh, it's because it's downloading files. But the join has already been confirmed, so we're okay. So I'll quit the app to give me the opportunity to create a new instance of TeamDrive. Okay, so I'll create a new instance. see whether the app's still in use. Okay. Okay, so now when we go to inactive spaces, we have our four spaces that have been imported from the key repository. So now we know that these four spaces are there. So in order to go through the process of importing a space directly from the key repository, let's say I just elect to elect to leave this space and leave that space. So now I'm unable to activate those two spaces and they're no longer available to me in the app. So now what I can do is I go into the TeamDrive settings and I go to backup, import keys, and then I import the keys from the server. And now if I go back to my inactive spaces, the spaces are now there. And I'll just activate these two for test purposes. And the spaces are now active once again. So those are your two options for importing a space. So you can import a space from the server, and you can also import a space from a backup file. Those are the main two options. An additional third option would be to request an invitation to a space. So if you've changed your password and don't have access to the key repository, or you cannot find your local backup keys, as an additional third option, you can contact someone else who is a member of the space. Hopefully, well, they will need to be an administrator, have administrator rights in the space, and they can send you an invitation. And through this invitation, you will be able to regain access to the space. A fourth option would be to contact our support. And we will see if there are other ways we can assist you with regaining access to your spaces. Sometimes it can be helpful to speak to a support associate to help spark ideas as to where you could possibly find local copies of your space keys. Okay, so part three, restoring a space. So you can restore a space to um, help fix local issues with the space. So, for example, your files aren't syncing correctly, or you need to re-download the exact state of the space from the server. So I reopen the TeamDrive app, and let's see, we can show our spaces directory as well. So we can see one space is still recovering, but we can see um, we have two spaces. And to restore a space, for example, again, if there was some types of issue going on, you can restore a space. So there's a key safety mechanism that's built into the restore process. So before you restore a space, it's important to understand what happens. So it's important to understand what happens to your local files. So TeamDrive will immediately rename your existing local space folder by adding underscore backup to the name. After that, a brand new folder with the original name is then created. TeamDrive will then download the space's contents from the server or intelligently copy them from your new underscore backup folder. However, only files that match the server's history will be copied. If you had any unsynced local changes before you hit restore, those changes are now sitting safely in the underscore backup folder. Once the space has been fully restored, you will need to manually drag and drop the unsynced files into the newly restored space. So there are two methods for a restore: a simple restore or a restore from scratch. We'll start with the simple restore. So we will use my first space. We just simply click on I, and then we go to restore. And we can also see in the local file system, we have our space, and we can see live what happens in the file system when we start to restore space. So you confirm again that we would like to restore. And we see that the underscore backup folder is created, and then a new space folder is created. And the files are either downloaded directly from the server or they're copied from the underscore backup folder. So again, if there are any unsynced files, they're stored in the underscore backup folder. And you maintain access to those files because they're not touched. Okay, the second method for restoring a space is to restore a space from scratch. So if a simple restore doesn't fix your issue, you can force TeamDrive to skip reading the latest join point on the server and read the entire history of events from day one. And what is meant by a join point? So when you perform a simple restore, the space is restored and joined using the latest join point of the space. So for example, if you made changes yesterday at 9 o'clock, a join point is created at that time period or at that point in time. So when you restore the space, it would use the latest join point, for example, yesterday at 9 o'clock, and everything that happens after there, it will manually process it. Now, when you do a restore from scratch, you tell TeamDrive to ignore all join points. And what that means is the app rejoins the space from the day of its creation and reads the entire history all up until this point in time right now. So it manually reads through the entire history of the space. So with that said, if it's a space with a very large history, then a rejoin from scratch can take some time. So we can go through the process. We'll try the same space. So we will click on I and go to restore, advanced, and now we have the option to rejoin from scratch. You receive a warning letting you know that this could take some time, and in our case, this space is very small, so it shouldn't take very long, but this is the process. And we see again in the local file system, a new underscore backup folder is created, now underscore backup 2, and a new space folder is created again. And as I mentioned, since this space doesn't have a very large history, the rejoin from scratch took no time at all. Okay, so to recap, our keys to success. So the key repository stores encrypted backups of your space keys on our server. So as long as you haven't changed your password or have access or actively logged in to TeamDrive on an additional device, you will have access to the key repository, which grants you access to your spaces. So use import when you need to bring existing spaces onto a new device. Prioritize the import from server option unless you've just changed your password, which means you don't have access to the keys on the key repository. And use restore when you need to fix a broken local space. And always remember to check the underscore backup folder for any unsynced local files after the restore is complete. And again, so if you haven't used TeamDrive, feel free to download TeamDrive now. Visit our website at teamdrive.com/download and try TeamDrive today. So I would like to thank you for joining today's session on the key repository and managing your TeamDrive spaces. I will now open the floor for any questions. So at the moment, there does not seem to be any questions. So again, thank you for participating in today's webinar and look forward to seeing you at the next one.